You're listening to the Better Two podcast with DM Needom. Hi, gang. Donna here. Thanks for tuning into the Better Two podcast. Today's guest is Joann Kedder. Joann is an author, and she is a reluctant author, or at least she was. Joann started writing stories when she was a kid, and she would give them out as gifts, but somehow they were never quite appreciated. But she always had this yearning to write, and she always wanted to write a story, a novel, something. But yet she kept talking herself out of it. So we talk about her journey on how she finally came to terms with being a writer. And it's a pretty impressive journey. So we talk about writing, of course, and we also talk about depression and how depression, well, she had her lowest moment, and she shares that with us. So I hope you enjoy the show. This episode of the Better Two podcast is brought to you by Kitty Mystic and DM Needom, author of My Days with the Dark Muse, as well as Love is Worth Waiting For. Hi, Joann. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing good. So today, I know you're an author, and your journey is really about accepting the fact that you were an author.
Right.
And I know that as a writer myself and an author, it takes a lot to finally put yourself out there and admit that, yeah, I can do this.
Right.
So how did this come about for you?
So it was a long journey, because I'm 57 now, and it took me at least a good half century to get there. I started out as a child. I wrote stories for Christmas presents. I would give them out. At age 10, I wrote my first novel. It was about a little girl who ran for president and typed it on the old typewriter, with the two fingers. Mm-hmm. So that took a lot of effort on my part, let's just say. And even then, I just didn't feel like these were my shoes. I felt like they were somebody else's. Like, this is okay to do this for fun. And I didn't really have a lot of support doing that. So I just pushed it away, and I thought, okay, there's something else that you need to be doing in your life. This is not you. You're not good enough for this. You're not smart enough. You don't know how to market, on and on. I could convince myself of anything. And I ended up in my late 30s, early 40s, going back to school. It was the same thought process. You're not that smart. You can't do this. And I decided, okay, I'll take one class. And if I pass that class, then I'll continue on. And that's my deal I make with myself. So I did great, continued on. I kept going till I got a master's degree in creative writing. Oh. And I had a publisher interested in my master's thesis, which was a novella called The Something That Happened in Pepperville. And the premise of that story was that someone never left town. They were there. The whole town was all afraid. They were all afraid to leave. So, the premise was, what would happen if an entire town of people just never left, if everybody lived their life as if there was no other world. So I got that published. And again, those were not my shoes. That's an anomaly. I had a great book signing in my local bookstore. And then we moved across the country to the Pacific Northwest, literally driving off into the sunset. And when we got here, I thought, okay, I have a master's degree and I've got a positive attitude, and that'll take me wherever I need to be. And I could not find a job, could not find friends. I ended up breaking my foot in a exercise class, and I kept going to the class because I so desperately wanted to have connection, because my husband was working on the road all the time. And so I ended up housebound when I eventually admitted, yes, I should have this looked at. And they had to actually remove the bone at that point. Wow. Because it had been so broken for so long. So I was housebound for over a year. And I remember, I'd like to think this is my lowest point, but I know it's not. But someone came to my door, and it was somebody that I'd met, I think in the dance class. And she came in, and I just hugged her and tears, and thank you so much for coming to visit me. And she said, I'm just here to sell Girl Scout cookies for my daughter. Oh. And that really, that was tough. So through this process, I really started going down fast. I didn't have the friends. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a support system other than my husband, and he was gone most of the time. So several years later, he was out in the woods hiking, and he had a massive heart attack. He had to be life flighted in, and he died 6 times. And while I was sitting in the hospital beside his bed, listening to the machines that were keeping him alive, suddenly it came to me, if you're not going to be a writer now, then when are you going to do it? You can't wait for the divine signal. This is the only one you're getting. So I decided, okay. And once again, I made a deal with myself, 1 book, I'll do 1 book. And if that turns out okay, then good. And I'll just move on to whatever else it is that I'm supposed to be doing with my life. And it turns out that after I did that book, the pull was so strong that I kept going. And now I just released my 9th novel. And I'm willing to admit that's what I am. That's who I am. I am an author. That's going to be who I am till the day I die. So I'm comfortable in those shoes now.
Did your husband recover?
He still has some mental deficits because every time you stop breathing, you lose oxygen to some brain cells. So he was unfortunately not able to return to work, but he has found a new passion doing landscape photography, and he's won lots of awards, and he's doing just fabulous.
Yeah, my husband, he died in the car next to me, and they didn't get him back for 45 minutes, and then they got him back, and then they asked me if they wanted me to intubate him. And it basically, I asked him how his brain was. And I knew at my core that he was gone. They're like, no, we won't know until we do some tests. So I understand your journey. I understand sitting next to the hospital bed, because he was on life support for about 5 days. And that was my choice, because I still needed to wrap my head around it. So I understand. I do understand. And I'm glad he made a full recovery.
Yes.
So let's go back to the lack of support. It's like, when you were writing these stories as a kid, did you give them as gifts, and it was kind of like, oh, thanks, that's really sweet?
Yeah. Isn't that nice? She found something to do that isn't going to cost us money to do Christmas gifts, kind of a thing. It wasn't ever, that you're not going to do that. That's not for you. That's for better people than you.
So in a general consensus, your parents weren't very much a cheerleader. They were just kind of like, yeah, okay, well, you're doing okay. Go away. I don't want to say go away, kid, you're bothering me, but it almost seems, as long as you keep yourself occupied, not a trouble, you're okay.
Right. Now, strangely enough, now that I've had some success, they are on board for the most part. But yeah, that it took me having the courage to do this without their support to get to this point.
Well, I think this is a lot about who you are, that, it takes a while. And with anybody that has had a childhood of non-supportive parents, it takes you a while to get into that comfort zone, because you always have that, dare I say, that negative thinking in the back of your head that you're not worthy.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
And it's amazing when you hear stories about artists, and not necessarily writers, but writers do play, and musicians, that my parents were so supportive. They adored me. They took me to practice and everything. And it's like, it's hard to fathom having a parent that can be that supportive at that time, and not just doing it because, well, everybody else is doing it.
Right. So I was adopted, and that was always a big issue too, because I was different from their family, and that not only inside the house, but in my school, I was kind of different, because at that time there wasn't a lot of adopted kids in our little small town. I had a lot of allergies. Nobody else had allergies in my school, which is really unheard of now.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately, when I was 16, my brother was murdered, and it was on the national news. And so if I didn't have enough to make me different, that really pushed me over the edge. And I went the last 2 years of high school without any friends, because nobody knew how to react or what to say. And so they just didn't. They just avoided me.
That that comes a lot. I've talked to people about grief, and it comes a lot to even the situation that I am. People don't know how to react to you after somebody has died.
Right.
I, one of my friends, her husband killed her, and it's like I had somebody from the national media reach out to me. It's like, and I'm like states away, and I'm like, no, I'm not talking to you. And then fortunately, nobody did that when my sister died, but my half sister, her husband killed her and her kids. And it was like, you don't know how to react. You don't know what to say. And, how do you proceed? So I don't really talk about it that much, because it's like, for me, dare I say, for me, not living in the city and having so many people murdered around me, it's just kind of like, even me personally, it's hard to digest. So when you lose a family member, it's just kind of like, especially in a traumatic situation like that.
Yeah. And this was back in the 80s when that wasn't as prevalent as it is now. And in a small town, those things just didn't happen. You never heard about those things. So yeah, people just don't, the pat response is always, well, let me know if you need, if you need some. No, what you need is somebody to intuitively say, hey, you look kind of sad today. Would you like to talk?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know why people can't just reach out and do that, but that seems to be a rarity.
It does. I remember, because I do live in a small town now, and I had a little shop here, in a beauty shop. And when COVID happened, I was planning on closing it anyway. And then my husband passed. So I closed the shop, and I'm in the parking lot at Walmart. I didn't know a lot of people. And this woman that was an acquaintance she was a friend of the beautician, but an acquaintance of me, she's like, hey, really loud. And she's like, I heard your husband died. I'm sorry about your loss. And it was just kind of like, I didn't make an announcement that my husband died. I don't want everybody to know. And it was just kind of like, it wasn't that she was going to be there and compassionate. It was just kind of like, you wanted to get in my business. And it's like, no, And that's kind of small town life. And you know that.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Everybody knows your business, or at least they think they know your business. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily in a supportive way. It's just I know about you. Mm-hmm. That kind of a mentality. It's really, it's sort of, dare I say, suffocating at times. Yeah. It's nice now that I've experienced life in a city, and I know how far I fell off a cliff when nobody could care if I, whatever happened to me during the day. That juxtaposed to the people who know too much, I don't know. There has to be a happy medium somewhere. But yeah.
Well, I think that's why you figure out who your core group of friends are. You trust them, and then everybody else is kind of like, okay. As my therapist once said, it's like you got circles, and you have your immediate core that's here, and then people are kind of go further and further out as what you're going to share and what you're going to talk about with them. And yes, I talk a lot about my stuff on here, but if somebody else can gain something from me, then good. If they want to tune in and gossip about me, oh, well, that's their prerogative. But the fact of the matter is, if somebody can glean something from your story or my story, then maybe they don't feel so alone.
Right. That's my hope. That is truly why I do this, is I want people to know that I've been through a lot, and there's no shame, as I had shame for years, didn't want to get help for my depression. And I'm here to tell you, it makes a world of difference. I've heard people say, oh, well, you won't be creative once you're medicated. Well, guess what? It really helps me to focus. So maybe I'm a little more creative now. There's no shame in getting help for being depressed, for feeling alone. I mean, a lot of people feel alone and feel sad and feel like, is there any point in me waiting for tomorrow? And that's something also that I want to address, because I have had some really low times when I felt that way. But I'll tell you what, if there's always something around the corner, you don't know what it is. There's always something positive around the corner. And if you opt out at this point, you're never going to find out what it is.
I had that conversation with my mother several times before she did it. And that's the thing, though, two things I want to touch on that you said, people are alone. Well, I mean, how many people are in a room full of people, yet they can feel totally alone? I mean, you were talking about your class, and then we have the celebrities who everybody thinks that they're so happy and all, and then suddenly they committed suicide. But the fact of the matter is, were they really happy, or did they put on this great persona? Because depression, people tend to hide it. They don't, because in our let's say you and I are around the same age. I think there's 3 years between us. I'm a little younger, but still, we grew up around that time in the 70s, in the 60s. Well, 60s, we really don't remember too much, but the 70s, where no, that's a bad thing. My mom put me in therapy after they split. So I knew about therapy in the 70s, but that was a rarity. Let's be honest. The 80s, it's still, it was not acceptable. In the 90s, it was kind of iffy. The 2000s, we started becoming a little bit more, accepting of it. I mean, I talk about when my mom attempted suicide when I was in high school. So I'm just going to give you the picture here, because here she is. She's about to pass out because she had taken pills. She's in the living room. Paramedics arrive, fire truck arrive, and guess what? All the neighbors are out. I am 16 years old, and it's like, okay. So they load her up. My stepfather goes with, my stepbrother and I are there, and the neighbors, of course. So what happened to your mom?
Yeah.
Okay, well, in my mind, I know what happened. I know what's going on, but there's that stigma that I don't want to have a crazy mother. Okay.
Right.
Oh, she had the flu. She ate something and something's wrong with her. I mean, she must have, it's either a stomach bug or something like that. So yeah. Really?
Yeah. And did they find out eventually the truth?
Eventually, the one neighbor I did tell, because he was close with my mom years later. I had gone back to Shreveport after she had moved out, and she actually had completed it. And there was one point when I actually told her, because she wanted me to drive back home to Shreveport to find her in her bathroom. She was going to shoot herself in the bathroom when she escalated. And I because she was married, it's like I could not sit there and say, well, can you go check on her? Because they're going to say, you have no rights. You're just her daughter. It doesn't matter. I need her spouse to do this. So, because once again, this is the early 90s. So I told her, I said, you call the neighbor to do that. You don't ask me to do that. I'm not, if you love me, you don't ask me. So years later, I went back to Shreveport, and I went and saw him, and I knocked on his door, and we talked and everything. And he's like, so how's your mom? And then, yeah, I unpacked it for him. And of course, he's just like, I never knew that about her. Well, no, everybody knew, like, before she did it. Everybody's like, oh, your mom seems so happy. She was talking about your wedding and blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, that's because you didn't really know.
Right. I guess something, as you were talking, I got to thinking, everybody kind of assigns you a narrative when you live in a small town. Oh, you're that person whose mother died, and da 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 da. So you've already got a story that they have in place for you, and it's really hard to break out of that and just be who you really are. I was the girl whose brother was murdered. That was me. Nobody knew that I was depressed. Nobody knew that I, didn't have friends. I was the girl whose brother was murdered.
And I got into a conversation with another author about this, because people judge a book by their cover, but we do the same thing with people. We don't look inside and read the blurb, or on the outside cover and read the blurb. We just look at what is perceived, whether it be looks, whether it be the gossip we've heard about this person. We don't actually look at the person
absolutely
as a whole.
Yep. That's absolutely true. And what that takes is an open mind and some patience.
But nobody has time for that.
Right. But we need to. I mean, we just can't lose that. We're in an age of sound bites and quick this and quick that, and everybody has their headset on. But we have to stay connected in some way. That's the human nature, is that we have to be connected. And if we let that go by the wayside, I'm really concerned for our country, because not just our country, I guess it's everywhere. Yeah. But that's what we need. And that's what I'm not going to say that's going to cure depression, but that's sure going to help a lot of people know that they're not alone.
Well, and once again, here we are, we're still in COVID, and now they're talking, I was just reading a few minutes ago about the fact that there may be more lockdowns. It's like, okay, so here we go again. And, when will this end? And as much as social media is supposed to keep us interacted, does it really?
No.
And has it unleashed a beast? Because then anybody can say anything they want without thinking about it.
Right. And one thing that social media has done is they will tailor what you see to what they think your views are. So that sounds wonderful, but then you don't ever hear an opposing view. And when you're out in public and talking to people, there are going to be a lot of different viewpoints, and you have to learn how to be diplomatic about it, and possibly be open to hearing something a little different than your mindset. And you might come away with a new viewpoint.
But isn't this something that we are lacking now with decorum? People just think that my opinion matters. I will I will bring the sword. I will stand righteous. I don't care if I make an idiot out of myself. I'm going to state what I believe.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, let's think about this. Would you have ever imagined somebody calling the police because their sandwich wasn't made correctly?
No.
Or going into a rage because their coffee order wasn't right. Or because, it's like, I don't know if it's because we've been locked down that people are just losing it. I don't know.
I think, that does go back to that cocoon of all of my opinions are valid. Everything that I'm thinking is good, is right. And that's what social media is feeding us. That it's affirming that whatever nutty thoughts we might be having, they're all good. They're all fine. So then we can go out in public and we can, yell at people who don't need yelled at, or do things that are really inappropriate, that we should know are inappropriate.
I go back, this was before COVID, and I've talked about it before. I have a handicap placard, one that hangs from the window. And yes, on there it says you should not drive with it. And I thought about this today because I was thinking somebody had an air freshener. It's like, what is the difference between an air freshener hanging? Because it's square, it's about the same, and that's legal, but yet this is not. So I go to get gas, and I was picking up my husband at dialysis. It was about 2-3 blocks away. So I stopped to get gas, and this lady comes around from her pump all the way over to my car and says, "You're not supposed to be driving with that. Not hi, not how are you doing, just right off at me." And I'm just like, what? You're not supposed to be driving with that. And I most likely could have handled it better, but I just looked there and said, "Get back in your car. I know what I'm doing. Get back in your car. I'm only driving a couple of blocks. Get back in your car." But you're not. Get back in your car. Just go. I mean, why would you do that?
It used to be that you could say, okay, well, this person is having a bad day. Mm-hmm. And it just seems like this is the easiest path for them to yell at somebody at the gas pump because you're there. Mm-hmm. But now I'm wondering if that's even true, because so much of this is happening. And is everybody having a bad day every day? I don't know.
See, and this, like I said, was about 3-4 years ago now. So this was before the whole Karen thing started. So it's like, has everybody just been teetering on this edge of I'm ready to explode and now I just can't help myself?
That very well could be. We live in kind of a pressure cooker society, and everybody's expected to do more and more and more with less, positive coming our way. I think you're probably right. It was probably well on its way before COVID, and COVID just sped it along.
Well, I mean, when you look at the one thing about COVID, you can look at the divorce rates that have gone up. You can look at the fact that the suicide rates have gone up, because mm-hmm. how do you envision a tomorrow?
Right.
I look at it this way because I lost my husband during COVID, and it was not COVID related, but it's like, so what does the future look like in dating? You used to have certain parameters of what you would think dating looked like, but now it's like, well, there's a whole plethora of other things. And how do you proceed with dating? I've not stepped foot in a restaurant since 2019. except to pick up an order and leave. So you can't go out for dinner.
Right. Right. You're back to, Zoom, whatever, which isn't the same as in person.
No.
You can't really get a sense of a person, I think, until you've spent some time with them in person. Yeah, there's so much.
And then you don't have a neutral meeting space, because usually you would do it over dinner or whatever. So it's either you do this and then you invite I mean, it's very convoluted and weird. And, I'm glad I'm a writer.
Yeah. Yeah. And that for me, I thought I needed so much socialization, and I discovered over COVID that maybe I don't. I'm okay. Because I need to write anyway. I don't need to be going out and, talking to people all day. I need to be holed away in my writing space.
Mother's Day, I wrote a phenomenal, I think I wrote 6,000 words on Mother's Day.
Wow. Good for you.
And it was, fantastic. My friends were like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." Thanksgiving, they're like, "Come on over." I'm like, no, I'm fine. I wanted to stay home this year. I didn't have to. Last year was the first year, and everybody's like, "You're going out for Thanksgiving, you're coming out for Christmas." And this year I'm just kind of like, it's just another day.
And that's a positive, that we can be at peace with those things now. And whereas before there was, I felt a lot of pressure, social pressure. Oh, you should go to this person's house. This person invited you for dinner. Well, I don't want to do that, but I should do that. And now I don't feel that. Now I'm just doing my thing. And if people don't like it, okay, I'm at peace with that.
I think that's the important thing, is finding your peace and finding where you're at in your center, and being confident in who you are, no matter the warts or whatever. You have to own yourself. And that's the hard thing. When I look back at being in my 20s, it's like, I faked it pretty well. I faked it like I could, but the thing is, nobody ever bothered to dig any deeper to see what was really going on.
Right. Yeah. And just ask somebody. I have a great story about somebody that I was going to meet in a coffee shop, and I didn't know she's new to town. I know she's going through depression. And I said, let's meet up and have coffee. And so I'm there at the coffee shop. And then the whole time in my head, I'm going, she's not going to show. This is such a waste of time. I'm just going to write. She's just not going to show. And finally, after about an hour, the woman who was sitting next to me came over and asked, "Are you Joann?" I said, "Yes." That was a person I was supposed to meet.
Oh, wow.
And she was thinking the same thing. So if you're not afraid to come out of your shell and just take a chance on somebody, because the chances are that they really need that connection, and they really need you to ask, "How are you doing today?" And tell me about you. Just, it doesn't have to be in depth, just something to let them know that they have value as a person. And by the way, this woman and I we talked for 2 hours, and we could probably talk for 2 more. So it was a very positive experience, and I let my self-doubt get in the way, and I almost missed her, and she was sitting right beside me.
Wow. And I think that happens a lot. Our self-doubt, we can talk ourselves out of things, and we can talk ourselves into things. And it's not always the best things we talk ourselves into.
Right. Yeah. I could talk myself into eating about 10,000 calories a day. I think it's funny to hear those things going through my head and thinking, wait a minute, that's not right. But yeah, my brain will say, "Oh, you need that extra chocolate, or you're not going to be able to write that last chapter."
Yeah, really bad day. "Oh, look, there's a pint of Chubby Hubby Ben & Jerry's. Yeah, that would be really good." I haven't done that in a long, long time, but yeah, that would be like my jam. If something was wrong, that was it. Yeah. I was going to have that.
And your brain's gone, "You deserve that. Mm-hmm. You had a rotten day. You really deserve that. The whole thing. Just eat the whole thing."
And then my husband would look at me and goes, "Do you realize how much fat is in there?"
Yeah.
I'm like, "Yeah, but it's really, really good."
Exactly.
But you get to a point where you have to realize there's other ways to cope. And I have to say, writing, and I'm sure for you too, writing has been a gift, because it gives you the ability to go and be someone else, and it gives you the ability to escape where you're at. Mm-hmm. And explore.
Yeah. And I will say that going back and looking at my first novel, The Story of Keela, now I realize, I was writing about a lot of things in my life. It sure didn't feel like it. And the story is not about somebody my age, or she doesn't look like me. She's a young girl. It's kind of a coming of age story. And she has to come to terms with some things in her past. But the central themes in there are definitely what was happening in my life at that time. So I think it's therapeutic.
I think whether we admit it or not, our lives do bleed into our characters. I mean, it's whether it be a stranger, a friend, or even our own experience, it just gets built into there. And I've talked about this before my husband died. Firstly, my second book, I had this character in there, a side character. He was only in a couple of pages. And when I started I was working on trying to write and I was stuck. So I started doing some bio stuff and background stuff. And this character decides, hey, that main character in your first book? I want her. I want her to have a relationship with me. Okay. And I know people are like, yeah, okay, so somebody's talking to you. Characters do this. Yeah, it's a whole weird thing.
Yeah.
So I ended up writing like 83,000 words in a month, which was insane. And so they had this whole relationship. Well, then I had already been told that the hubby was on borrowed time. So I'm sitting there and I start writing this guy's death scene. And my husband would come by my office to go to the bathroom and he's like, hi, mind you, I'm sitting there bawling my eyes out because I'm writing this. And I'm like, hi, stop crying. Everything's fine. We talk for a few minutes. Then he goes to the bathroom, comes back and goes back to the bedroom and start writing again, start crying again. So I look back at that because it was like 2 months before he died. I was already in the process of grieving before I even started. So
and that's probably really healthy.
It was, but like you, it's like whether you admit it or not, your world was bleeding in.
Right. And I like what you said about your character talk to you. That was something also that when I wrote the first book, I went through and I had to find the perfect name because it had to have meaning besides that. The meaning of just the word. Oh my gosh, hours and hours I spent doing that. And I was still living outside myself and trying to impress, I don't know who, because I knew there'd be somebody who had figured out what the meaning of those names were. And to this day, I don't know now why I named any of the characters the way I did, but now I just sit and listen and I let them tell me. And when you're open to who you are, I guess this is kind of a universal theme. When you're open to who you are and what you need to do to make your soul thrive, it comes to you. Mm-hmm. Everything comes to you.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'll have my characters, they will come to me at night and they'll come to me if I would go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. And unfortunately, if I have any thought, if I actually wake up enough, that's it. Another 2 hours, I'll be awake and laying in bed because they have something to say. And it's like, really? Yeah. I just want to go back to bed.
Yeah. Don't you hate that? I mean, I went through different phases. For a while, I would keep a pad beside my bed, but then I can't see without my contact, without my glasses. So the stuff I would scribble was just like Morse code. And when I got up the next day, and then for a while, I just ignored it and said, I just can't, because I'll be awake the whole night. And then I sort of got to the point where I think it was bubbling over because I was saying, nope,
yep,
it's not you. This is my brain. So now that I just say, okay, come on down. The price is right. Tell me all about you. Now that I do that, I don't wake up in the middle of the night because all the information just comes to me in the day and I'm not repressing it. So for me, that's what worked the best.
I mean, usually if I am in bed, I'll hit the record button on my phone and just do an audio message. But even if I've written all day, if I wake up, it's like there's still more to say. And it's just like, come on. I mean, there's months where I won't write, but maybe 1,000 words. And then there's months where I will write a ton and you would think I'd have more books out, but I'm such a perfectionist about the story and trying to put the story where I want it to go. And that's something I came to the realization this week about, because somebody was like, well, there's so many books out there now. There's so, why pay for marketing? Because there's so many books out there and there's a chance you're never going to find an audience. And I write for myself anyway, but I had somebody recently tell me, well, you need to find your audience. You need to write for your audience. And I'm thinking, well, you know what? The whole honest truth is I am my audience. And
there you go.
I enjoy what I write. And if somebody doesn't like what I write, oh, well, because the first book I wrote is very dark. It's written from a guy's point of view. It's his journal. He's a drugged out rock star. He is not a nice man through most of it. But that's what called to me. That's what, like you said, that's what came to me. I was at Barnes and Noble, and here I am. Oh, I'm trying to work on my other book. And he's like, hey, no, let's start a journal. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go. And that's what I did. And whether it turned out nasty or not, that was his words, not mine. I mean, they're my words, but what I mean.
I know exactly what you're saying.
I know you do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like I said, I think that translates to anything that you're passionate about. And maybe you're holding yourself back from saying, oh, I got to wait till I'm retired. Oh, I got to wait till the time is just right. Don't do it now. That you don't know that there's a time after you retire. You don't know that there's even a tomorrow. And if you leave this earth tomorrow, do you want your obituary to include your passion? He was passionate about XYZ, or do you want it just to be a dry, born, died, end of it? That's now I can say mine will say she was an award-winning author. She published multiple books. That's what I want. That's who I am. I can be at peace now. If I go tomorrow, oh well, I've got books out in the world.
My husband used to sit there and say, well, you're not going to finish writing your novel until I'm dead. I'm like, no. I wrote 2 before he passed, but okay. I started writing a novel back in 1987, and I kept toying with it. I even sent my first chapters to a contest, and I had an agent reach out and say, give them to me. I want to see more. And I didn't do it. I didn't do it though. I was working a normal job at the time, and I was not close to being finished. And I look back and go, you were an idiot. You should have sent that stuff in. To look back and say, this was 1997. Where would I be in my career had I done that? But the fact is, I'm where I'm supposed to be.
Exactly. And you can't do that. You can't look in the rearview mirror because you'll crash. Mm-hmm. You need to be looking ahead and just you're in a great position now. And this is exactly
where I'm supposed to be.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I'll give you a laugh because I used to work in claims. There was a lady who she saw a car coming at her, and she had her kid in the car, and she decided, because I asked her during a recorded statement, I'm like, so what did you do to avoid the accident? I put my hands over my eyes and counted to 3.
Oh my goodness.
But I mean, that's tantamount to, I don't know where I'm going, so let me do this. And I sat there and I was just, how do you respond to that? I'm like, so did you try to turn the wheel or anything? No, whenever we're scared, I taught my son to put his hands over his eyes and count to 3 to calm him. And I'm like,
oh my gosh. Well, at least she was honest with you.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, if she was married, which I don't remember if she was or not, what did your husband say to that? And I mean, I guess that's tantamount to saying, well, it's out of my control. No.
Right.
I mean, if a car's coming at you, you got to kind of swerve.
Make an effort.
Yeah.
A little effort.
And that's the thing about writing, is it takes a lot of effort. And I'm amused, and I know you have a master's, so you're way ahead of me as far as I consider myself a storyteller. My grammar and stuff I need help with, but I write stories. And I find it amusing how the grammar police are so hardcore on books, but yet they don't want to pay for them.
Right. But I think that goes back to they can do that from the comfort of their home, and nobody has to really know who they are. And now that's just sort of a thing that people do, is they're just nasty. But I also don't want you to think, I don't want anybody to think that having a master's degree is what makes a good writer, because I just came back from a writer's convention where I've met quite a few 6-figure authors, and I would say less than half of them had degrees.
Really?
So, yeah. So, and that's another thing you need to think about when you're writing is what am I doing here? Am I doing this just for myself? Is that fine if I just write this and that's it and nobody else sees it? Am I doing this because I want to make money? If you don't have to have I'm writing this book because I want a bestseller. Well, that's like winning the lottery. So find the reason that you really do want to write. Do I just doing it for fun? Great. Just do it. If I want to just, there are millions of places online that you can post your work, publish it. And it's there and people can read it, and you don't ever have to have a hardcover. There's all different options. Just be open to them. Be open to whatever you find that feels right, because there is no right. There is no, you have to do this or you have to do that. Just do what works for you.
But I'm sure, like myself, if you don't write, you start getting bound up and a little anxious, and it's like
very antsy.
And that tells me that, and I'm not saying that it doesn't make you a writer if you don't get that way, but I think it makes you pure storyteller if those words have to come out. And I mean, you make a very, very valid point. When I write, firstly, I write for me. Secondly, yes, I would like to make some money at it. And there's no way to describe the first time I saw my name in print. And I held it in my hand, because it's an amazing thing that it's like, look, I've accomplished this. And it's like, people will get mad at me, but it's like having a baby, because this is something that you worked and created, and it's a powerful thing to hold it in your hand.
Absolutely. Yeah. I always liken it to having a child as well. Because you totally gave birth to that. You totally put everything you had into that child.
and as the personal stuff bleeds out in there, you're putting some of your own stuff out there on the world. There was recently an author, one of my friends online, she wrote something personal. She made her character go through this scenario, and some of the things were true. And the girl was 18 years old, and there was a dirty bathtub involved, and there was sex involved and everything else. And somebody left her a 1-star review saying, there's no way an 18-year-old girl would do that. And here's the funny thing, and I've talked about this, and you're, like I said, we're close in age. Why is it that people around 40 and 50 years old decide, oh, yeah, there's no way an 18-year-old would do that? Did they forget who they were?
Yeah. Yeah. Because it was the Wild West when we were growing up.
Yeah.
When I was growing up anyway. Yeah. And anything went. So,
yeah. I'm like, and, mine has an 18-year-old that is going to get married. And somebody said to me, an 18-year-old getting married? Why would that happen? I'm like, it's the 80s. An 18-year-old getting married was perfectly acceptable.
Exactly. Especially in the Midwest.
Yeah.
It was a cultural thing. And you just, that's what you did. You got married right out of high school.
I grew up in New Orleans and Shreveport. And yes, same thing. I mean, it was acceptable and it was okay. And, there's the big no-no of you can't have a 20-something-year-old dating a 17-year-old. I understand that's not right. But how many girls did you know that had, I have a college boyfriend? I had a couple of them.
Yeah. Oh, a lot, because that was sort of a status symbol. Mm-hmm. And if you had to get permission for your date to come to prom because he was out of high school, oh boy, you were somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think we look at those things in a bigger picture. It's like, oh, I forgot. Suddenly, yes, an 18-year-old is going to act like a 40-year-old woman. No. An 18-year-old is going to want to take a man wherever she can take him.
Right. I spoke with a very prolific author recently, and she was telling me that 1-star reviews are people who they're reading in the wrong genre. So that was somebody who should not have read your book because they were.
Like I said, that was my friend, an author friend of mine. You'll be amused. So there was a girl on TikTok who posted that she got a 1-star review. And you ready for why she got a 1-star review? The person said, I didn't even read the book. I don't like the genre it's in.
Wow. People don't have any clue what that does to us as writers and marketing. It screws with our marketing when our rates go down. So,
well, and the thing is, if you're going to leave me 3 stars, tell me why, so I can sit there and analyze it and say, okay, do I need to make a change, or are you just full of it? That's give me some meat, Mm-hmm. But then that being said, and when Barnes closed, I had a friend, and I still have a friend who worked there, but this woman came in, an older woman. She was in her 60s, and she was returning Romeo and Juliet because she was not aware that the book had 2 suicides, and that really bothered her.
Okay. All right.
How many adaptations have we had of that in movies? So,
well, that was a surprise for her that day, I guess.
I guess my friend's like, I'm like, let me get somebody else for you. Cause she's like, I just couldn't talk to her because it's like, really?
I mean, yeah, I had a friend who got a 1-star review and the person wrote, I didn't like this cover. That was it.
The worst I've gotten is 3 stars. And I've told this story a couple of times. I've gotten 3 stars. It was for my first book, My Days. And her review was, I hated the book. I hated the characters. I can't believe I finished. And I said to myself, well, you finished it. So that says a lot about it. And my husband at the time was like, so are you okay that you got this? I said, she hated it. That's an emotion. I connected with her on a level. Now, here's the amusing thing. So I re-released it with a different cover, new edits. I spent the money and did it properly. She read it again. And this time she wrote, very strange. Still gave me 3 stars.
And was it basically the same book, or?
Yes. The only thing that changed was the cover, and it was edited. There was no content that was changed. Now, when Love is Worth Waiting For, I did add some content in there. I changed a couple of things, but My Days, no, that was a straight up edit. That was the same book.
That's funny.
Yeah, I was like, so wait a second. You read it. You hated it so much the first time that you read it again.
Yeah.
Who does that?
I would be curious about her other reviews. And I'm wondering if she just leaves 3 stars.
No, I got a 5-star from her on my other book.
Oh, okay.
That has a happily ever after.
Okay. All right.
She said that's more like it. So that told me everything I needed to know, because there's no happily ever after in Days.
Right.
So,
well, my favorite review ever came from this woman who said, I absolutely love your work. I read everything that you write. But what you did to that dude in the potato cellar, that was demented. That's my favorite.
That's a good review, though. It is. I mean, It kind of has to make you feel like, yeah, that's me.
Yeah. How many other people have things happening I'm giving away a plot point. I'm sorry, but how many other people have gruesome deaths in a potato cellar?
Not many. Many. And I mean, even if it's a plot point, it's still taken out of context. So we're okay. We're all okay.
Right.
Yes. I'm dealing with a bit of a sinus thing, so my voice is kind of iffy today, but
all time of year.
Yeah. Yes. So is it weird now that your husband's around more?
Yes, that took a lot of adjustment for both of us. We live in a small space, and I used to, before COVID, I used to go right in coffee shops, and then, that ended, and here I am in the small space, and he's right here. And it was so challenging. And so my kids, for my birthday, bought me this little 1-person tent, and I put it on the back porch, and year round I go out there and sit and write. And that's my private spot. So even, when I've got my gloves on, I'm typing away, and you do what you have to. But yeah, it was a big adjustment to have him home. I
imagine. I mean, fortunately, my husband and I, we were around each other all the time. So it wasn't that big a deal. But, and I didn't have I guess it wasn't uncomfortable being around him. And we have a big enough space that we could be apart. But I mean, we spent a lot of time together prior. So it wasn't the big shock that it was for a lot of people.
Yeah. My husband was on the road, 7 days a week. He was a train engineer. So he was on call 24 hours a day. And I'm trying to think, there was one week that we counted out, he was gone 100 hours.
Wow.
So just having him from completely gone to completely here was a huge, huge change.
But you survived.
Yes.
And that's important. So are you currently working on a book now?
I'm working on 3 books right now. So I just published the 5th book in the Piney Falls Mysteries series. And I like to say that not only has mysteries, but it also has a recurring theme of family. And each book, the characters are growing and finding more their unconventional family. They're finding out how that really is beneficial for them. So that's that series. I just published that. I have a series that's the detective is retired. She's in her 70s, and she's working with a paranormal investigator who owns a beauty salon. And so the second book in that series will be out in hopefully April. And then my Pepperville Stories series, I'm writing a sequel to the book that was my very first publication, The Story of Keela. I'm in the midst of that. And then I'm working on a short story for an anthology that I'm a part of this summer. So staying busy.
Very busy. Very busy indeed. So what is your favorite thing about being an author?
Just that it feels right. I've had many jobs in my life, and I have to be honest and say I didn't really enjoy them. When people would say, "Oh, I just love my job," I would think, "Yeah, that's baloney. You're lying to me." But I just feel every day like this is me. I'm putting on my suit every day, and it fits. So that's the best thing, I think.
And that, people don't realize when you're doing something you're passionate about, it fills you. You know, I mean, I can look at my intern's job and think, okay, the investigations I had to do, I love that part. I loved investigating accidents, finding out all this information, which goes back to being a writer too, because as a writer, I research the heck out of things. But the other part of the job wasn't so great. And that was soul sucking. And when I became a supervisor and I had to do more of the managerial things on top instead of the investigation, the job started lacking. So you have to find something you're passionate about. When I first started insurance, and you'll be amused by this, this is back when you had a floppy disk. So I would go into work, and during my lunch hour, we had this one computer that was tucked away from it was offline. It had, but I could go into this little room by myself and spend my lunch hour writing. And everybody's like, "Where are you at?" I'm like, "I'm in here writing." "Why are you doing that?" "Because that's what I do." And they thought it was weird, but that's how I enjoyed my lunch.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And then once again, you keep that balance.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And I don't think everybody finds that, if you can go home and not be so inundated with social media and everything else coming at you, and you can take time to do what you love, then it's gonna fulfill you. It's gonna make you feel better.
Right. And you don't have to, carve out 2 hours a day or whatever, just even 15 minutes. If you can sit down and write, I've told several people that told me that I don't have time to, I want to write, I don't have time to write. Well, then just do it in stages. Sit down tonight and say, okay, I'm going to write everything I know about this character, and just keep going until you've got all your characters filled in, and then start make an outline. And then when you sit down to actually write your story, you've got bones right there. You don't have to think about it. They're already there. So if you have 15 minutes a day to do whatever you love, then do it for 15 minutes.
And what I would piggyback onto that is, and if you write this outline and if you write down the character things and somehow when you're writing, it changes, it's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. My outline and my finished product do not resemble each other at all.
Oh yeah. I got many outlines and, and going back to creating the character thing, when I did the bio, it's like once I immersed myself into creating their worlds, getting their worlds, I created a Bible. It's got pictures of the main character's house that she grew up in. It's got her car. It's got all these things plus houses for the future. Once I had all that visual legwork done, then it was like the inspiration hit. So sometimes you need to step back to be able to go further in.
Right. Fertilize the soil before you plant your crops, and they'll do much better.
Yeah. And I don't think as writers, we're so focused on making everything perfect. And it's like, you have to just let the story go. I mean, when I sit there and look at, it took me 2 years to write my first book. 30 years, bits of that book will be seen, but that whole book will never be seen. And it took me 30 days plus then a little extra after to write my second book. My third book, amazing. But my third book, it's been about a 2.5 year project. So it comes and goes. And the reason why that book happened so quickly was because at the time I had a contest I was planning on entering. So that contest motivated me. I found out I had a month to write this book, and it was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And then when it got down to the actual contract for the contest, I wasn't giving my stuff away. So I kept it, and I'm like, you know what? I can put bits of the planned series in here and tie that in eventually. While it's a
Mm-hmm.
standalone for now, it'll eventually be part of the series.
That's fantastic.
So I think if you can focus on where you think the big picture is going in your book, because you write series as well, then you understand that this is a long game. It's not a short game.
Absolutely. Yep. And while I'm saying, get to work and do what you want, because if you get hit by a bus tomorrow, and you didn't ever get to do what you wanted, that's I'm not saying you have to write your whole book today. I'm just saying get busy on whatever project it is, whatever fills your soul today. So if you die tomorrow, then you did what you loved before you left.
Well, I can be a testament to that because I'm in the process of going through my house now, and I have a jewelry making station downstairs. That wasn't mine. That was my husband's. I have a brand new saw that he bought that he never used. I have all these things that I look at and go, these were plans that he had or plans that we had together, and they're not here anymore. So now I have to look at that and take stock and go, okay, now I have to get rid of it. And it's one of those things where it's like, you really have to look at what is materialistic in your life, what is material, and what matters. Because ultimately, what's going to happen to it? What holds value for you today may not hold value for you tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Where like writing your book, it still holds true.
Right. And your words will always be there in some form.
Exactly. So are you traditionally published?
My first book was the one that I wrote for my master's thesis. And then I was away from it for several years because of, depression and everything. So when I came back to it and I had this mindset, I've got to hurry up and get this done because I don't know what's happening to me tomorrow. And I went the self-publishing route, and I'm really glad that I did, because I feel like for me that is the correct route to take.
I interviewed somebody, a British author who's also a screenwriter, and she was traditionally published, and she now is indie published. And she's like, really the difference in payment was just mere pennies. I mean, it wasn't much at all, the difference. But her whole problem was she released a book through the traditional publisher, and they gave her a cover that she despised. It did not tie in with the story. The girl looked very whimsical, and the story was really gut-wrenching. And she's like, it's a disconnect here. I don't like the cover. Well, that's too bad. That's what we're doing.
Right.
She's like, so you can be you can be the best champion for yourself. Not a publisher has so many books coming through that they're not going to take the time to really pay attention.
And they're also not going to do marketing for you. No. Either way, you're going to have to do your own marketing. I had the same issue with the cover. So when their rights expired, then I recovered that first book, and they had wanted me to change the ending. Well, I did change the ending because I blew up the town in the end. I said, no, you can't do that. And so I kept it, and I'm glad now that I did. But again, I didn't have any control. I lost all control. So some people are okay with that, and that's fine. But when you self-publish, every little detail is you. It's on you. That can be a burden, or that can be a positive. And for me, it's been mostly a positive.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I have a friend who's like, you're going to get a contract one day. And I'm just like, I don't know that I want that, because what I write, I like to call realistic fiction, which I know is not really a genre, but it has a realistic quality to it. So it's like, I don't know that I want somebody telling me, you can't do that, because apparently, the big thing, a man cannot cheat. A woman can cheat in a book, but a man can't cheat. And I do write about musicians. And there's a lot of women that believe that musicians would never cheat. Sure, John Bon Jovi is a prime example of that. But how many other stories have you heard of musicians and cheating?
Mostly they do.
Yeah. So when I'm being told that, oh, well, so I don't want to, somebody's like, well, you're a romance writer. I'm like, not really, because there's elements there, but it's more about the family history, the emotions. It's about how everybody thinks everybody in Hollywood and rock stars are all okay when they're not. They're just as messed up as the rest of us.
Right. Or more so.
True. I mean, because you and I can hide, but they're living in a fishbowl.
That's true. Yeah.
I used to have a beta fish back in the 80s that I called Rockstar because you're living in a fishbowl. And it was the truth. And that's the thing. I don't think people really realize how much of a fishbowl you're living in.
Right.
I mean, in a way, when you think about it, it's kind of like living in a small town, but on steroids.
You're right. Right. Yeah. I mean, everybody knows you. Everybody thinks they know you, I should say. And everybody has a preconceived idea about you that's going to be very hard to change.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like when, I guess about 10 years ago, it came out that David Lee Roth was an EMT. And everybody's like, what? There's no way. But it was a preconceived thing that you think David Lee Roth's this wild guy.
Right.
But.
Right. Wasn't part of the narrative.
Nope. So is there anything you want to add to the conversation?
I would just like to say you can find all my books on my website, and that is joannkedder.com, JoannKedder.com. Please take a look. And if you like what you read, please leave a review. And I always love hearing from fans. So there is a contact us button on my website. Please feel free to just tell me how your day is going. I don't care. I like hearing from people. So. Yeah,
I'd love to ask if you're going to have any signings, but right now with COVID, Lord only knows.
Actually, I am having a signing next Saturday. So, I'm very nervous about that because it could just be me there, which I have to think of good practice. That'll be good practice for something bigger down the road. So,
go ahead.
So fingers crossed anyway.
I did a signing that had been put off for a year and a half at one of the bigger libraries here, and there were supposed to be 40 other authors, and it was I had some friends show up, and after my friends, it was kind of like occasionally there'd be somebody straggle through, but other than that, the authors all hung out together and we chatted, at least the ones that were right there by you. But it was still getting out, and I mean, during COVID, you gotta take it as practice,
That's good that you had a support system there.
Yeah.
You weren't by yourself.
Yeah. Well, especially because this was the first time I had done anything. Last time I did something was a psychic fair with my husband right before that was November 2019. So that was the last time I had done anything. So this wasn't just my first book signing, he was there. So it's like, okay, now what? Because I was fortunate enough to have a book signing at Barnes & Noble before they closed that location. I wasn't just me, though. It was a bunch of other authors, but still. That's
impressive.
Yeah, still to be in Barnes, it was just kind of like, okay, this is cool. So, I mean, take it for practice and enjoy it. That's one of the key things. Just enjoy it.
Yeah, so. I'll try. And like I said, I'm going to be positive. And even if it's just me and my husband drinking coffee, then so be it.
Yeah. And I mean, keep writing. It's your passion and you love it. And that's important. And, I think anybody dealing with depression, even if you're writing a personal journal, it's a good thing to have. Mm-hmm. It's a good thing to be able to look back and go, look what I made it through.
Right.
And survived.
Right. And I kept going. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. Don't ever think that you're not enough, because just getting out of bed for some people or some days is just tremendously hard. And if you do that, pat yourself on the back and say, look what I did. And
you never know, even with COVID, you never know what tomorrow is going to hold. You don't know that you're not going to get a phone call from somebody or a Zoom call, that you're going to meet somebody that's going to be an amazing person to know.
That's right. And you never know. Netflix could be calling. I'm waiting. That could happen.
I mean, we all know what sex life. That was a book, and it turned into a major thing, and she's got a second season coming. So, there
you go. Never know.
That's right. There's a lot of networks out there, a lot of people searching for entertainment, so you never know. So
right.
I thank you very much, Joann, for your conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. This was fun.
Oh, her story was fascinating. I should tell you, and I'm sure you heard me mention in the chat that, yeah, my voice is kind of going, so I apologize. So this is going to be kind of short, but I hope you learned something. I mean, it was an interesting talk. Having another writer to talk to about the process and everything is always fun for me. And I hope you guys glean it as well. And maybe pick up some tips just to, if you're going through a depressed moment or something and you need something to latch on to, take a pen and paper, take your phone, hit the record button, and just get your thoughts out, because sometimes just getting your thoughts out is going to help you a lot. So on that note, because of my voice, I'm going to shorten this up. As you know, you can find us at the better2podcast.com site. All the social links are there. And I greatly appreciate any support you give. And especially tuning in is a blessing. So thank you very much. And I guess I'll catch you next time. Bye. Audio production done by Rich Zai of Third Ear Audio.